right, so the last demo that I have for you on this buffet week is the bread cube. So this one is pretty straightforward. I kind of go over how you make the crust, how you make the holes in the bread here, and how you make these sort of poppy seed kind of things that are up top. So yeah, this is another older demo that I'm sort of rehashing for y'all and doing a new voiceover, but it took me about an hour to paint back in the day. I'm gonna fast forward it so it's about 15-20 minutes, and yeah, let me know if this helps you, and let's get going. Got some bread music for you. So like always, I'm gonna start with my drawing and my local color. And in this case, I'm going to combine the two on an overlay layer on top. The reason it's overlay and not a color layer is so that I can have changes in value. So I'm going right from the start. I'm going to start putting the holes into this bread. You know, like these kind of holes you see over here. One thing that's very important to note is that these holes aren't like, you know, a lot of times when people paint holes in something, they just make sort of like cartoon, like Roadrunner style holes where they're just flat. You want to think of them as like, you know, dips into the form of this thing. So they're not just going to be completely flat. What I'm going to do is they're going to have their own light and shadow within those holes. And I'm keeping the color pretty much the same as this like neutral light gray, because this bread, once I start painting it, it's going to be fairly white. Maybe a little bit of yellow I'll add with a color layer later, but right now I'm just using a lasso tool to create these holes and trying to be, you know, vary up the size with them. And as a reminder, if you hold down Shift, you can keep adding to the selection. And so what I'm doing is I'm putting a light right along the edge, not on the shadow side, but on the light side, I'm going to have a shadow inside the hole, and then there's going to be a light right along the edge of it. So there's the shadow on the inside of the hole. And there will be eventually a light on there too. But now I'm doing a normal layer on top. Nicely labeled by yours truly. And this is going to take care of the crust on the top. I kind of want it to be sort of layered, so just like with the stone cube, I'm trying to make it look like there's kind of, you know, a chip kind of taken out of it, or some variation in the depth of it. So by having a soft edge here and then having a hard edge along the side, it'll make it look nice and crispy. I want that flaky sourdough crust. So anytime you want to make something look like, you know, nice and crispy, use the lasso tool to make that hard edge. It'll help out a lot. Alright, so a new overlay layer, making that side brighter because it's getting hit by the light more. That's too bright. So I'm going to have a little bit of yellow on that side. And that's where I'm putting that bright, like I was talking about earlier. I'm using the main chalk brush for this because I want it to look like, you know, porous, like what's happening on the reference over here. I don't want it to be super slick looking. And here, what I did just there is I hit Control and click on the layer that I drew my holes on. So that way it'll select those holes, right? And using that selection on this overlay layer, I inverted the selection, Control-Shift-I, so that way everything I paint won't be going into those holes. It'll keep them nice and clean. And I hit Control-H to hide my selection because I like to hide it while I'm painting just so I can see what I'm doing. Now a little bit of the color layer, just to make it not 100%, desaturated on the bread. But I'm going to come back in and desaturate it. Overlay layer, making the top a little bit darker. Look like it's kind of burned. Not burned, but nice and toasty. So kind of coming in and scumbling some lighter values on top, making sure that the holes stay nice and clean. So this is what I was talking about. I finally got to it. But you see how one side of the hole, it's like a little bit brighter? That's where the light is catching that lip of the hole. This painting makes me miss San Francisco and the sourdough bread I used to get. They don't have the best, they have pretty good bread in Japan, but it's just not the same. That's an aside. So I felt like putting the crust a little bit onto the other side. That was just a little bit of a creative decision there. And if you notice right now, the light and shadow sides aren't as well defined as they could be, but I'm going to come in and reinforce that before all is said and done. And I'm going to use some harder brushes too to make these holes feel a little bit tighter, a little bit more dry. So now I'm using is that the spatter brush? Looks like. To get a little bit of sort of variation on there. Exactly sure what I was trying there. It's always a bit of trial and error when I'm painting. Even when it's for a demo. So here I'm making the sort of like with the grass brush or the grass and dirt cube where I made a brush for that. I'm gonna be making these seeds that are going to be on top. So over to the side, I don't think I'm actually making a brush, but I'm making a selection of just all these different kinds of seeds. And I'm doing it off to the side just because it's a little bit easier to visualize than doing it on top. So I make those. Make the shapes look good. Oh, maybe I am making a brush out of it. Sorry, it has been a little bit since I recorded this demo. If time was more available, I would repaint this for y'all. But I figured getting 3 demos this week would be better than one that I painted. Okay, so here I am making a brush again. So I take all that back. I was gonna make a brush again. So playing with the scattering, playing with the shape dynamics. So you see, if you play with shape dynamics, you play with scattering, you can make it look more random because it'll get bigger and smaller depending on how hard you're pressing. And this is on its own separate layer, so I can erase what I need to erase. And I'm just putting them in black for now. And so I lock the transparency on it. That means that I can come through and paint, and it'll select just the seed. And I'm basically coming in and putting the light side on them. A little tedious, but it's a lot faster than if I had to do every single one by hand. And then I lose my patience, like I'm wont to do, and just hitting everything with that light. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make a new layer underneath, and that will be the shadow. So that's the layer underneath with the selection, and then I'm just shifting it a couple pixels, and that'll make the shadow underneath those seeds. So that'll make it feel three-dimensional, and then I'll come back in on the light side and sort of add some variation as far as color and little pops of highlight and stuff like that. And because I don't want it to look super pasted, I'm just going to do some by hand where I put the shadow and the light on the same layer. But this method is a really good way of getting a bunch of random little shapes really quickly. And I'm sure you'll do better than I did. Now I'm adjusting the contour, making sure that that contour looks nice and crispy like a piece of bread. Now I'm coming in with a brighter value. And just sort of scumbling on top with the hard edge brush to make it look nice and crispy. So now I'm putting a color layer on, and I'm just hitting it with a slightly desaturated warm so that it doesn't feel like just plain white. I mean, that's kind of what bread is like, but you know, for a painting it'll be more interesting. Putting a multiply layer on there so I can get the shadow side. Push the value a little bit on the top and in the holes. So it's important to keep those seeds on a separate layer. So like what I just did was I selected them again and I was working on them on a layer on top to brighten them back up. So one technique I like to do, one technique I like to do is like using the multiply layer to sort of push all the values together with a slightly darker value, and then erasing out of it where I want things to stand out, like so. So I kind of push things a little too far, then I take them back. This is just me running through the layers. Doing my shadow trick as always. And bam. Got our little bread guy to go along with the others. So, and there's the version without the seeds on top. I kind of like that version as well. But, yeah, let me know if you have questions about this one. Let's use code word sourdough bowl. If you've ever been to Fisherman's Wharf in San Francisco, it's like a very touristy part of San Francisco, but you can get clam chowder in a bowl of a big like sourdough loaf. And I could use that right about now. Feeling a little homesick. Okay, well, I really appreciate you guys seeing this, and all right, talk to you soon. Bye.